Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you today, and I am super excited. We got Andrew rejoining us. We got Mark rejoining us. We got Sean and myself, and we're going to be talking about manners. But before I get too far into that, make sure you're following your manners, doing all your things like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff, get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Fridays for The Collective, Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. And if you haven't already, make sure you're signing up for the Reinforcement Loop, the weekly newsletter that we send out to re-engage the thought process on what it is we're talking about. I'm stoked. So let's get into it. Andrew, you're first. Give me a quick 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
I am Andrew Siepka. I am the lead strength and conditioning coach for Marine Corps Base, Hawaii. I own Siepka Luda Strength and Conditioning. I am a former maritime assault operator in the Coast Guard and a veteran advocate. So I like to think of myself as a modern day Renaissance man, kind of jack of all trades, master of none, dabbling in many.
I like it. I'm going to take that from you. I'm going to steal it, just so you know. Mark, how about yourself?
Hey everybody, Mark Bouchard. I'm a police officer up in Canada, almost 20 years in law enforcement, 10 years in tactical policing, so SWAT or ERT, and I now help coordinate the National Tactical Medical Program in the RCMP.
And kicking butt doing it with that very nice shiny forehead, as he's not part of the hat crew today. Let me Good. Sean, how's life out in the mountains?
Well, Mark, you did say you're trying to embrace it, and Chance is helping you embrace it. So that's a little insider when we're in the green room just before we went live. So things are good out here in the mountain. Looking for some interesting angles on this subject, manners. When you put it up, Chance, of course, we've never done a podcast on it. It could go in so many different ways, but I got to say that when I saw the subject, the very first thing that came to mind, and this is a bit of a tangent, was Doreen and I were over in Chiang Mai for a few weeks. We were in a night market, a food night market, and we were wandering around. We're just in the back corner of like hardly anybody in there. And Doreen saw like this little wooden little sign that said, "Manners maketh the man." And it was in Thai, and then it was in English. And I was like, what the heck? I'm in freaking Chiang Mai in the back 40, and there's this little sign here. Why is this sign here? Is this a sign for me? Is it a sign for the tourist? Is it a sign to like pump up the food stall? What is this sign all about? Because, man, you can wander through life and see things like that and think nothing about it. But I stood in front of it, thought about it, took a photo of it. I was going to pull it up for this podcast. Maybe I'll put it up later on my IG. But I took a photo of it, of us standing there with manners maketh the man, because it really is an important subject. Where I think it's all gone wrong is manners is only thought of as please and thank you, rather than the much deeper aspect of manners. So manners really does make the man. We've just got to go deep enough in this subject today to reinforce the fact that it's cool to have manners.
I agree, and that's why I wanted to get into it. This is a much deeper topic than most people think about it, and I'm excited to get this started. So let's start at the bottom here. Andrew, you're up first. What do you think, manners? What does it mean to you when you first saw the email? What clicked in your head?
So first of all, one of the things I love about what we do is like I found out what we were going to discuss yesterday, right? So it kind of like right away, I'm like, manners. And like Sean said, initially, like that shoot from the hip thought was please and thank you, holding doors, yes and yeah, like, oh, the things what we think that our parents will teach us when we're young. But I started to look up a few quotes, and one of the ones I found right away was, what you do has a far greater impact than what you say. And that made me think our manners are everything. Our manners are our actions. It's how we carry ourselves. It's how we treat other people. It's how we conduct ourselves when no one's watching, when everyone's watching. It's anything and everything. And I kind of am very excited to see where this goes, because I feel like in a way we're going to open Pandora's box, because when you look past please and thank you, manners really do make it the man, because most of us have said or been in communities before where we say the good dude check, the good dude vibe, right? And we all kind of know what we mean when we say that. And a lot of that goes into the manners, right? Are you selfish? Are you, only thinking of your own needs? Are you cutting corners on your work? To me, those are also manners. Those are also things that matter, that go way beyond just please and thank yous. Because I can say please and thank you and still give you the middle finger. That doesn't mean I have good manners. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And you can smile through your teeth. You can be all kinds of deceptive and still be polite. Let's put it that way. Mark, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so same. I reflected on it after getting the email last night. And what I came up with for me was like manners. Well, let me rewind. What makes humans special? To me, it's our pro-social ability, right? It's no one by themselves can get to the moon. No one by themselves can win a war or do any of these amazing things that we accomplish. We do it with the use of others. We do it by working collaboratively, by learning from the collective knowledge. And I think what we do with manners is we reinforce those social connections. It's the pleases and the thank yous. It's the kindness. Again, some of it is unspoken, right? It's not necessarily just please and thank you. But I was even thinking how it shows up in different languages. Sean, you mentioned your trip and going over to Asia. Well, I only know a little bit of French, but I started thinking of that s'il vous plaît. We're deferential to someone. We're saying, if it pleases you, or some version of that. And I think it's the sharing of a joint idea, but then deferring to that other person. And I think sometimes, even whether it's leadership, when we're working collaboratively, and Chance and I discussed this a bit in the green room, I think there can be even a bit of an illusion of choice. Like we do this with kids. Like I ask my kids, do you want this or that? Right. So you're giving them options. I certainly saw that in my time in policing as well, where, I say, hey, do you want to go to jail or do you want to go to the hotel for the night? That kind of stuff. So you could deliver the same message in a lot more effective way. And at the end of the day, that's the whole goal, is to be effective and to use that to build social connections and to collaborate well with others.
Ooh, I'm digging where this is going already. Sean, you got any other thoughts on this before I hit mine? Having difficulty with the mute button? There it is.
There we go. Sorry. So I do have a thought, but it's not contingent upon anything that's just being said. It's kind of a different tact to this subject. And so historically speaking, when you think about manners, and I'm just going to talk about not mannerisms, because that's, manners are part of mannerisms. I'm just going to talk about manners and our loose definition of what manners means. And generally speaking, it's considered as, you're really polite. You say please and thank you, and can I get that door for you, and have a nice day, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's not really how manners started out. If you kind of go way, way back, manners were something as simple as you demonstrating to the other clan that you were approaching that you weren't armed, or that you didn't have something under your belt, or that you'd take your helmet off. The tip of the hat at one point was maybe a visor being lifted. So everyone understands that historically manners came from somewhere. Over the centuries, things have evolved. And so manners, to me, to some degree, have been not watered down, but they have been taken less of, they're less serious. They're not considered as a need to have. They're considered as a, wow, he or she is really polite because they said please. Well, at one point that was just commonplace. Just like hundreds of years ago, flipping your visor up was commonplace. So manners evolve over time. And I feel that in our modern time, they've been not stripped out, but they've really been diminished, where you can be impolite or you can have less manners and it's still socially acceptable. And so think back just like 2 decades ago. If you were walking into a business meeting, or in fact, today, if you're in Japan, like, you're getting a business card, man. When's the last time you guys got a business card? Like, business was done by business cards 2 decades ago. Now you can barely find them unless you're storing them in your time capsule. And so let's think about another aspect of manners. 7 years ago, everyone shook hands. But now you don't know whether to shake a hand because of the pandemic. You don't know whether to do a knuckle. You don't know whether to stand back and just nod. You don't know, like, the proper freaking hardcore handshake used to be a thing. Now, and this is what made me think of this little monologue here, is now, last night I watched two dudes, and they were they were athletes, and they were trying to congratulate each other. And the first guy reached in for a handshake. The other guy went in for a knuckle bump. And so then it was this I swear, it went on for 10 seconds. And the two of them, I just wanted to grab both of them, shake some common sense into them and say, just shake a freaking hand. Be mannerful. Just say, how are you? But they went through this hand gymnastics, not because they didn't want to say hi to each other and recognize each other. The conventions of recognizing another person nowadays has changed so much that when I'm approaching friends, I don't know if it's this, I don't know if it's this, I don't know if it's this, because we have something called a pandemic we just went through. One thing changed manners. And the manners that got changed continue to ripple on today and tomorrow and so on and so forth, to the point where I've found people are far less polite, are far less keen to reach out and shake a hand. Social distancing has become a manners distancing to some degree. So that's my thought. See where we go.
Interesting. Yeah. This is it's quite interesting, because I was initially, when we got this started, I was talking to my son about manners, and I asked him, do you know why we have manners? Like, what do you think we have manners? What part of this does it, what part of this little ritual that we do makes sense to you? And he was like, well, you tell me to, please say please and thank you, and you tell me to chew with my mouth closed. And I was like, okay, yeah, I do tell you that, but do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's something that we should do? And he was like, well, yeah. And I asked him why, and he was like, well, because then we don't get in trouble. He hasn't thought too deeply on it, but for myself, I always looked at it as it's a personal discipline, first off, right? It's that little extra work that you have to do, and it's about, Winterstorm actually put a comment here that I want to touch on in a second, but it's, I care. That's my extra effort because I care. And it can be very simple. And to your point, Sean, when I do a handshake, I'm a handshake guy. I don't do the whole flimsy, what are we going to do? I just hold my hand there until someone shakes it. I let them figure it out. Here's the hand, do what you need to do with it. And I've gotten a couple high fives that way, which is pretty interesting. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I think, to Mark's point as well, there's this concept of acquiescing to each other, of like, well, I'll do a handshake. Well, oh no, it's a fist bump. Okay, wait, no, now we're not, like, there's this back and forth of acquiescence versus a kind of a general hierarchy that we used to have almost immediately. Right? You would see the person, be like, rate them in whatever way you're going to rate them, and then you would fall into whatever line you needed to fall into. And I just want to throw this comment up here real quick here, and then we'll talk about it. Winterstorm says, manners are an expression of value and time. You show a situation or person that they have value to you by expressing manners, by taking your time to do so. Being polite and having manners are different. And I want to touch on that. So what do you guys think? Andrew, what do you got?
Well, I want to kind of play off of what you said there with your manners being a part of discipline, because kind of to play off of what Sean said, with going through a pandemic and seeing that, for lack of a better term, people in society can get away with being rude without any sort of repercussion. Really, it lets us know that manners aren't necessary to be in a functional society, right? However you want to read the lines on that one. But I think one thing that we're all talking about, like manners, for me, to play off a discipline, are more about a personal accountability. So regardless of how you treat me, I'm not going to treat you any other way. I may act accordingly, but I'll always have manners, because at the end of the day, I'm accountable to myself and my own actions. So if anything, I'm going to mirror that back onto you. I'm not going to low down, like get to your level. Like, you know, one thing I've realized is in a lot of these things, when it comes to manners and whatever way we look at it, like you'll see people punch up, like in that term of hurt people. But once you're aware of that, you never punch down. You don't punch down, right? You educate. And sometimes we educate by just doing the exact opposite of what people think we would do. So, you know, if someone's rude or short, I may, you know, hey, what's wrong with you? Like, what's your problem? Oh, I didn't mean it any sort of way. Because in a way, we're almost so conditioned in our life that I don't have to think about anyone else. And when we have manners and we act courteous, it is actually thinking of other people as well as ourselves too, right? Like if I'm respectful of my time and I'm showing you manners, I'm also being respectful of your time. But if you're not respectful of my time or what I'm saying, I also need to have enough respect for myself to make you aware of that, right? But now the way I do that is entirely up to me. Because if I look at everything as a hammer and a nail, I'm going to start running into problems. Like I've said before, if I start seeing people who are screws or need other tools. So I can't always use my manners in the same forceful way, just like with life being very dynamic and fluid, like the manners kind of have to go the same way. And, you know, I don't want to take up too much time because of where the conversation is going to go, but I have a story I'll get back to that showed me it was manners in action of more of a de-escalation, which was different for me coming from a community where it was like, hey, usually if I was involved in it, like I'm in charge or the people I'm with are in charge. So what we say goes. Um, you know, but I'll leave it with that, plant the little seed, see what you guys got, and we can circle back on that.
I like it.
You're leaving me wanting to hear your story, Andrew.
Hit us up,
Okay,
man. We got
all right,
time.
then.
Hit us up.
All right. So when I first got out of the Coast Guard, I worked at a veteran transitional home, so a 100-man transitional shelter. And my job was doing urinalysis, checking for contraband, you know, giving the evening meals, pretty much like a low-level nonprofit prison, pretty much for these guys. They're going out trying to get reacclimated into life, but at the end of the day, they're coming back. They're living in bunks. They're, you know, living in communal housing. So things find a way to get in. So at night, I would work by myself, but they'd all be coming back from work or whatever day programs they were in. So part of my job was grabbing the guys who were doing urinalysis, also getting guys who are coming back from work fed. But when there's one person, the funnel gets really tough. So I'm like trying to get guys to pull who don't want to do their whiz quiz, getting them to stay, getting guys who are hungry who just got back to wait for food. And I had this one dude come up who just like wasn't having it. So he tries to cut the line. He gets in my face very aggressively and he's like, I want my food. I'm not waiting for all this, blah, 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 blah. So I told him, like, listen, man, there's me and all of you guys. So, like, the best thing you could do for me and everyone right now is just like, wait your turn, please. Like, there's a lot going on. And I said it like that, but I kind of said it stern. He didn't like it, cussed me out, stormed off because I just didn't give into it. Well, then later on, after everything's done, I do a security round of the building. He finds me in the back of the building and he pulls a knife on me. And he's like cussing at me. You disrespected me in front of all these people, like blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So I'm sitting there in my head, just like all you guys in this situation. I'm like, okay, reactionary gap, like thinking really fast. Like, if he tries to do this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to move to this way. I'm going to, you know, move laterally, close the distance, grab his neck, like secure a clinch, grab a tie. Like, dude, just going through all these things in my head. And then real quick, like just for a moment, it's like, that's not going to help this situation. Because even if you end up on the ground, like he's got a pokey tool, and that means fluids on the inside get on the outside, and you're all by yourself. So like, there's nothing good that's going to come out of this. Like, so in that instance, the right mannerism was de-escalation. So I looked at the dude and I told him, I was like, listen, man, like I don't know what we did to get to this point, but if I offended you that much, like I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like I didn't mean to offend you. Like I just need you to understand, like you guys have a lot going on and I have a lot going on trying to help all of you. Also, you're not the only person here. But if you were upset by how I treated you around everyone else, like I'm sorry for that, but I also need you to look at how you treated me. And just like you, I'm a veteran too. I have my struggles too. I've been deployed too. But here I am trying to make something good out of it, dude. So like, how can you help me help you in this situation? And like I was scared because I'm like sitting there thinking this dude's gonna just swing on me or just start poking and like this isn't gonna work. He hugged me and started to cry and was like, I'm sorry, like, this is so hard, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's an addict. He's struggling with that. He's struggling with being in jail. He's struggling with being separated from his family. And he just didn't want to hear no on this day. Right. But like within that situation, I could have looked at my manners and been like, I'm not going to let this dude disrespect me. I'm in charge here. And kept going tit for tat with him and got myself in a worse situation. Or I could have had the wherewithal and the know with how, even in the situation, to just say, I'm sorry, and have the manners and the humility to be like, I'm sorry, dude, even if I didn't do anything wrong, but I'm sorry that I made you feel that way. And that was enough to disarm and de escalate. Right. And yeah, that's a lot going on in that situation, but it's like, just like I said earlier, everything's fluid. So there's a choice presented in that situation. I could show manners one way, like I said earlier, where it's like, I'm going to get my respect, or I could show my manners through humility. Which one in that environment, which one with that specific job I'm tasked with, which tool am I going to use? Because going back to that hammer, nail, screw analogy, if he's a screw and I have a hammer, I'm causing damage, right? But if he's a screw and I have a screwdriver, okay, now I have a power drill. Now it's even better, right? So matching yourself and your ability to the environment you're in, if you're called to those things. Like I said, I'm a coach and a veteran advocate. So I'm like called into these environments. So these are tools that I have to use because in my environments, people don't care how much you know until they know that you care about you. He didn't care about me until he knew I cared about him. And sometimes it takes me, regardless of what my title and accolades and things are, to act out of humility and have my humility show and let that be something that shows not just my words, but my deeds and actions show the type of man that I am to be able to break bread with someone, whether that's physically, mentally, or spiritually. Because at the end of the day, you know, Mark, you said it, we're communal creatures. We're supposed to be together. This is someone that very clearly was isolated and felt alone and was in straight up survival mode and probably hasn't had anyone say sorry or I care about you in a really long time, you know? But look what got him in that situation. And for me, that was kind of like that real big, like, oh crap, because before manners were totally different. But that was something for me that happened in my life, you know, 12 years ago that was like, oh wow, like it just kind of flipped it on its head where it made me look at the gray area, just like other things in my life have made me, you know, learn how to operate in the gray.
Yeah.
Um,
Once you
but
start,
yeah, so
when, once you start learning to see the grays, that's the beautiful point.
mhm,
Because a lot of times you see respect and disrespect, and there's no in betweens, right? And you start to see people for
mhm,
once you start to see people for what they are, it's a little bit more fluid in every situation. And that's a fantastic story. On the Instagram side, Blackwater Technical Diving jumped in here and said Roadhouse. I thought,
yeah,
absolutely perfect because you know you got to be nice until it's time to not be nice. But
yeah,
there's a line there, but you got to go through the
yeah,
process first.
yeah.
Mark, I saw you jump in here. What do you got?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story, Andrew. That's a really powerful story. Um, it made me think a little bit about life as a police officer, a frontline cop. Not so much just the danger, like I don't want to try and like one up your story kind of thing. Um, but so often we deal with dysregulated, in pain, people suffering, whether it's because they're a vet, whether it's because of childhood trauma, all these kind of things. And how do we interact with that? Like whether that man pulled a knife or not, like let's say in that same situation he doesn't pull a knife, but you can still have that same outcome where you can now realize, oh, this is that person's pain talking, and still find like a positive resolution. Like, how awesome was that? And good on you, first off, for how you dealt with that. That is no joke and not an easy thing to deal with. But I do think it's important that we're willing to address, I don't know if impolite is or lack of manners is the right term, but when there's a problem out there in society, whether it's directed at us or whether it's directed to someone else, there is a time and a place to stand up for what's right. And I'll tell a little story of one of mine. Mine was probably 15 years ago, and I was at McDonald's in a really hard part of Vancouver. It's in Surrey, like Wally, so like a very harder part of town. And there's someone who I would describe as probably like a homeless drug addict type person. That's my assessment. It's just screaming, yelling at the girl working at the front counter. And I'm at the back of the line, like I could just stand there and be quiet, just like everybody else. But I stood up and just like, hey, you can't talk to her like that, right? And basically like, you need to get out of here. And the guy tried to kind of intimidate me with like, what are you going to do? And it's like, I'll make you. Like, this is not okay. You can't treat people like this. Because he just thinks the more he yells and swears at this little girl that he'll get his free food. And it was wrong. So sometimes, like, we do have to address that. And I'll say I saw it not only in my life as a cop, where you'd get the people who, like, they hate you because you're a cop. And I would just try and put it on the table right away, like, hey man, I don't know you, you don't know me. I'm going to treat you with respect, but I'm going to expect you to treat me back with respect. And if you're not, then we're going to have a problem. We're going to deal with it. And usually once you were just clear and firm with people, you would actually get back that respect. And often I've had people where I arrest them, where I give them a ticket, all that, and they're still thanking me because you treat them with kindness, you treat them with respect. And the one thing I always remind myself, my last post was a small town, let's call it like 10,000 people. I'm going to run into this person at the grocery store with my toddler. If they want to hurt me, they can hurt me, but they can really hurt me by hurting those I love and care about that can't defend themselves. And I always remind myself, treat that person as though you're going to run into them tomorrow, next week, next month at that grocery store, and just treat them with kindness and respect. You can still be firm. You can still assert yourself, do your job, but you don't need to go out of your way to be mean or vindictive. And I think that if we bring that into our interactions, it serves us very well.
And this is a great point. I wrote down earlier anonymity. And I think this is to Sean's point as well earlier, where you're saying, years ago, it used to be people had more manners, or they utilized them more often, or something like that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there wasn't as much anonymity then as there is now, especially in the digital age, because we can use devices. Why is everybody so rude in vehicles? A lot of it has to do with the speed you're going, but also the fact that you are an anonymous figure. You're just a person in a vehicle in front of the person, or beside or behind or whatever. But there's a level of anonymity there where you can get away with it. And I think that's a key portion that I want to touch on, in the fact of manners, because it's an extra bit of work. It's a little bit more than what you would just have to do. A lot of people don't want to, because it's that extra little bit of work. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I do. I want to distinguish between three terms. I was listening to the fellas, and I scribbled this down because we're in a bit of a murky, or such a broad subject, that I wanted to refine it a bit more. So I've created some nomenclature. All right. So 3 terms: etiquette, morality, and manners. They're all very different, but we're using them kind of similarly. So I'm going to distinguish or delineate between 3. Etiquette, specific rules. We all know what the specific rules are in an encounter, in a relationship, in a friendship, in a meeting a person for the first time. If they're a good person to you, if they're a bad person to you, there's etiquette. There are rules. They're pretty universal. And even if nobody ever teaches them to you, the world will teach them to you through time. But etiquette, again, is the specific rules on how to live your life. Etiquette. Morality is right and wrong. I'm going to keep it as simple as that. And then manners is the underlying consideration for the other person. So you can have etiquette, you can be applying the correct specific rules for that moment, but simultaneously, you don't have to have manners, or you can have manners. And it's that underlying condition, that underlying, I'm going to call it vibe. Manners to me is vibe. Your vibe that you're bringing. Your manners are on display before you open your mouth. Before you say your first word, you're displaying your manners. Manners aren't etiquette. You could be walking up towards me in a respectful pace, with a respectful posture, a respectful structure, and approaching me with either a handshake or knuckles or whatever in a proper etiquette, while simultaneously 4 layers deep, your underlying condition, your underlying vibe is disrespectful or is negative or is I'm putting my hand out with a smile on my face, but I'm putting out a vibe like, I don't like you. So manners, you can be saying, hi, nice to meet you, while at the same time, that would be the etiquette. At the same time, the manners are, screw you, I'm going to crush your hand as I shake it. Manners are interesting. They're not as simple as please and thank you. It's often the emotion that is attached to the please or thank you. You can flip someone off with a thank you, or you can embrace them for life with a thank you. And so the words are not what we're talking about when it comes to manners, in my opinion. What we're talking about is your intention, your underlying considerations, your vibe that you're bringing to things. So since we're doing story time, I've got a little story happened this week. So I just finished my ride up on the trails, rolling into town, rolling down the sidewalk on my bike, nice and slow, super safe. And as I get up in front of Hooper's, our bakery, I do what I always do. I roll along and I kind of jump off the bike in midair. The bike is still going, and I just touch my foot to the ground, just kind of like a super ballet star, and kind of glide to a position where I lean my bike against a lamppost. Very graceful, but not like offensive, not aggressive. It's just a very stylistic, fluid dismount. As I'm rolling down the sidewalk, I'm scanning up the sidewalk, and I see a guy. He appears to be homeless. That was my first assessment. I'm in the midair. I'm not even foot on the ground yet. And I see this guy shoot up from his position where he was cross-legged on the sidewalk, guitar in front of him. And he shoots straight up, pivots, and starts moving straight directly towards me at a pretty good clip. And so as I'm watching him out of my left eye, I'm taking my helmet off because I don't want a helmet on just in case it pops off. I mean, it's going to go down. I've got my camera in a fanny pack on my back. I quickly unclip that, put it on my bike, and then I'm doing all of this casual because I don't want to give off the vibe like, oh, I know someone's coming to me, so dude, it's wartime. I'm prepping for battle. So there's none of that going on. I was really casual about it. And then as he was just about in front of me, I turned to him casually and said, hey, how you doing? What's up? Got my hands up in front, create some distance, and kind of gave him the vibe of, I'm open to whoever you are, but I'm going to know more about you before we become friends, before we become polite, before we start applying manners. And so I'm now going to condense the story into a very short moment. At some point, as he came up to me, like as I got my hands up, he leaned right in, got his shoulder up, bladed on me, and then bumped my shoulder with his shoulder and said, hey, what's going on? And so I kind of just backed up and said, hey, how are you? What's going on? And I was putting out the manners vibe. I was putting out the, hey, I'm a fun guy to be around. And so he wouldn't give up. He wouldn't give up with his attitude that he'd adopted as he started moving towards me. And his attitude was, he didn't know who I was, but he was trying to figure me out. And he was going to figure it out through aggression. And so at some point in the conversation, like about 2 minutes into it, he was letting me know how much he likes fighting, how he wants to fight the toughest guy in town. And I swear, I am not making this up. I wish I was. It's so bizarre. I wanted to look behind me and see if someone had like signs behind my head that had a script on it that the dude could just read out like loud. Because he says to me, I want to fight the toughest guy in town. And I want it to be like, and he kind of looks up in the air, it's got to be a guy from the army. And it's got to be someone in the special forces. And he's got to have done martial arts for a really long time. I'm like, what is even going on right now? That's me. And so I said, oh, well, you don't sound like a guy that I would want to tangle with. I'm going to go into Hooper's and I'm going to grab myself a pastry. And he says, and he kind of like gets in my way and he said, have you done martial arts before? I was like, I've done some. And he said, well, how long? I said, well, a while. And then I said, what about you? You sound like a guy who's done something. How long have you been doing martial arts for? And he said, 34 years. I said, wow. How old are you? And he looked at me and he said, guess. And I said, you look like you're 47. And he took a step back and he said, how did you know how old I was? You're with Intel. I used to be on the MK Ultra program. You'll have to look up MK Ultra to know how crazy that is. I used to be in the MK Ultra program. And then like now he's squaring off. I was like, okay, dude, I got to go in. And I just went straight into Hooper's and like de-escalated by being very polite and basically dropping my little ninja smoke bomb and straight into hoops. So that could have gone so many different ways. And none of it had to do with me saying please and thank you. The entire manner part of the conversation was me vibing that dude. Not saying things, but vibing to him, creating a situation where he didn't feel like it was go time, even though he wanted to go. And so manners sometimes are less about words. They are more often than not how you hold yourself in the moment. And that's not just physically, by the way. That is digitally as well. I can be saying whatever I'm saying right now, but if I'm saying words, those words have to match with my vibe. If I'm saying, thanks, it's really nice to be hanging out with you guys on the panel, but I'm putting out a vibe that is completely the opposite. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be a psychologist. You don't have to be anything. You just have to be human to understand that the vibe is always there. Some people pick it up and know they're picking it up. Some people pick it up and don't know they're picking it up, but it still influences them. It still impacts them. You can have people in front of you where you're being outwardly polite. Your manners are on point, but because you've got a weird vibe about you, perhaps for them, they are hearing please and thank you and let me get that door for you. But there's a dissonance in them that they don't understand. They can't even put a word to it. They can't even define why they feel the way they feel. Why, as you're saying thanks, it feels like F you. They just don't know why, because they haven't spent a long time tuning their antenna, thinking about what an antenna is, putting words to feelings. So manners are words, typically, but I believe that as a whole, it's feelings or vibes that are manners.
This is I'm glad you brought this up, and I wanted to bring this conversation to this point in the fact of when you work with animals in general, horses, dogs, things like that, you start to understand that manners apply everywhere. It's not a human thing that we all have manners, and I think that gets your point, Sean, of the difference between etiquette and manners. When you see dogs interact with each other, they have a very distinct social manner system. When you work with horses, same deal. If a horse particularly enters a herd and starts acting a fool, he gets told very quickly by the herd boss that that's not going to fly. And he'll be extricated, actually exiled from the herd for a matter of time. And then eventually he'll be allowed to brought back in. And if he doesn't act right, out you go. And it's very cut and dry. You either you follow the line or you don't. And I think it's an interesting way to engage manners, because I think this is where the degradation of manners happens in humanity, is when that line gets pushed back a little bit, or it gets grayed out a little bit. And it's like, well, we'll accept that, but I don't like it, but we'll accept it for now, that kind of stuff. And I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. So, Mark, I want to hit you first. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Chance. Well, to even tie slightly back into Sean's story and his point there, like I think a part of what you're saying, or to me, what I'm hearing in my own words, Sean, is intuition. And it's the subconscious, it's what we know without knowing. Like I think like a lot of us think it's the prefrontal cortex that's driving everything. It's this thinking system. And we're really these giant subconscious icebergs that most of that is what's happening. And back to my own experience, just anecdotally as a police officer, man, I saw so much of the kind of situations we're describing of like that. Someone who probably, I would guess, has some level of like mental illness or something kind of like that, probably drugs often. And then an element of danger, an element of like disrupting people. And personally, like, despite having lots of training on use of force and lots of relative comfort with using it, I almost never did, because you could use, as you would describe, vibes, but you'd know how to interact with someone. And if it started going that way, you knew the right steps to redirect it, where you knew how to create a little bit of time and distance to have a bit of a reactionary gap and to ensure your immediate physical safety. And it bought you time to use that influence, right, within your words, within how you, what vibe you give them. And there's times when I would find someone's getting real jacked up and they're getting ready to fight. And it would almost become more of what I would describe as like a posturing and submitting. So, and I don't know if that's anything in your dynamic there or the story you had, Andrew, but it's like they're posturing like they're going to be the one that's about to hurt you. And I, again, in my role as a police officer, I've literally had to say to people like, hey man, I'm worried I'm going to have to really hurt you and I don't want to. Is there anything I can do to get you to get in this cell block, get in this car, get in these handcuffs, whatever that thing is? And you could really see that change of how quickly they went from thinking like, okay, I'm the predator, to like, oh God, oh man, I better do what I'm told. And it's the weirdest dynamic to see how the communication happens, how just, our mannerisms is how we interact. But I never would come in jacked up like, I'm here, I'm ready to show everyone how tough I am. It's more, you come in with the other side to me of the kindness, the softness, the manners, the give them an illusion of choice, like, hey, trying to ask for their input. But then if they were trying to escalate and almost intimidate you, you had the confidence to say what you needed from there.
Professionalism. I love it. This is a big one. Sean, what do you got?
So it's because, Mark, you'd said the dynamics or the dynamic situation, and it made me realize that I didn't explain myself as well as I could to make a larger point. And that is, all of our interactions on a sidewalk, in an office, on a digital screen is a dynamic. It is a dynamic interface, always. And the more aware and more sensitive you are to the dynamics of the moment, the shared moment, the more successful you are in creating a positive outcome within the dynamic of the moment. And so what I failed to add to my story, which is important now that I've listened to Mark, is that the individual that came up on me and was fairly aggressive, I'm not saying like really aggressive, but fairly aggressive. What was interesting about that was I very quickly established, I said this to my wife the other day when I got back from the from the event. I said to her that this guy actually had a really big antenna. Like, he had a good antenna. He was tuned in. He knew what was up. He was playing a tight game. How I was interacting with him and how he was interacting with me was sophisticated. Like, he wasn't just a dimwit who didn't know what was going on. In fact, I would go so far as to say that as I was interacting with him, I actually had to level up my interaction from the initial entry because I had mischaracterized him in my mind as to how sophisticated he was. His antenna, his understanding of the moment was tight. And I do believe that's because, as I shook his hand and made that instant evaluation of, he's been on the street this long, based on ... his face ... this ... all of these things that I was rapidly profiling up on him. I'd made an early assessment on him within the first 1 or 2 seconds, but then 10 or 11 seconds into it, I was like, oh, this guy's pretty sharp. He's feeling things. And I do believe it's because, unlike most people on the sidewalk that day who haven't lived on a sidewalk and therefore don't have to pay attention to the sidewalk, this guy has been paying attention to the details of interactions for quite some time. He has a better read on most people than, I don't know, people that I've met this year. And so I think the mannerism aspect is less about, to my point, less about a one-way please and thank you. And it is more about that two-way highway of a dynamic interaction that is in the real time being established of what the mannerism and manners are that we're going to apply in this moment. It is not a one and done. It is a fluid dynamic.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that one. Andrew, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, so just after hearing all that, even within my own story, right? Like, so a couple things to even think about. The man that I was talking about was probably about 60 years old. So obviously that is going to come into play. But then the other thing that, I'm trying to take in a situation through threat assessment and all that is like, you guys knowing my story, had just recently come out of a, mental institution myself. And it's like, I really need this job. Like, it would probably feel really good to knock this guy's teeth out and strangle him, but I really need this job. And even though I'm only getting paid $11 an hour, like, I can't go home and tell my wife, like, I got fired because I beat some dude up. So, like, I need to, intention, kind of what Sean was saying, like, I need to make sure that my intention is where it is, even within these fluid and dynamic interactions. But one thing that, even listening to you guys discuss, it made me think about the use of force continuum. And stage 1 or level 1 is officer presence. And officer presence is the way you carry yourself, the way you present. And even in those scenarios where I might have been saying sorry, there was nothing about my posture of positioning that was saying that I was going to cower to this person. I might have been saying sorry, but my demeanor was, we have no problem from my end, but if you have a problem with me, then no problem. But I'm making it clear on my end that we have no problem. And that's what I mean by being able to use that de-escalation, because even within that use of force continuum, it can always go up or down. But if I start at level 1 and I can finish it at level 1, which is just having a presence, having that body language, having that situational awareness of not being a soft target in this interaction, that might just be enough to not have to do that and then go home and have to tell my wife I lost my job. So it was also an interesting situation, because it was one of the first times I had to apply something that I had learned from the military or from my time in service into this new season of my life. Where before it was like, okay, level 1 didn't work, let's go to level 2, let's go to level 3. Like, right in that situation, it's like, I need to stay here, because if I don't stay here, I don't have a job, and I can't do that. So, it's very, very pivotal. But just kind of hearing what you guys are saying, it all comes back to that intention and that situational awareness. And even if we're in environments where we don't have control, what do we have control over? And control that, be aware of that, refine that, work on that. And even within those, right, it's kind of like brought up these other layers of myself, even as I've grown, or these skills, these hard skills that I learned in my 20s that I'm still using in my 40s. After this time in service has been gone and all these different seasons in my life have happened, it all still applies. The games of the rule all still apply. It's just, how do you apply it in different environments?
This is a really good point, and I have a question for you guys based on this. I just wrote down here that from what everything you guys are talking about is that manners are the gatekeepers of emotional dysregulation. And the reason I say that is the fact that there's been a few times in my life where I've gotten close to a fight or been in a fight or whatever. And to your point, Andrew, there is a little thing, there's a voice in the back of your head that's just like, I am gonna mess this dude up. And and it feels right. It feels good. It feels like yes, this is gonna work for me. But manners, I think, are what take that switch and go, wait a second, like what happens after? What happens what can I do right now to not have the consequences of this emotional dysregulation, which is I'm angry, I'm pissed off, I want to throttle this person. And I just want to see, do you think that's an accurate representation of what we're kind of getting at? The manners are the gatekeepers of the dysregulation. Mark, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it kind of ties back into what Sean said of it's a bit of what is getting communicated. So I think sometimes there's a difference between message sent and message received, but it's us, if we are choosing to have that nonviolent outcome that we want, right? We want to resolve whatever the issue is. It's a way to communicate what we want. And it's essentially like we get regulated from other people. So if we are dysregulated, if we can come into contact with someone who themselves is regulated enough to help us, then that's the way we can communicate it to them of, hey, like it's, as I think it was Sean that said earlier, like it's the metaphor of the empty hands, of the helmet off. Like there was ways of doing it physically. And now I'm just using my words, which is just another tool of our connection as people of how to use this and show you that I want to help regulate you, or I want to find that that better outcome, right? Even Andrew, as I was hearing you speak there, that's kind of what I was connecting with too, is coming back to this. Okay, if you can get the outcome you want without violence, like I think back to my policing experience, so many times that could have had force in the same situation, and so many times that I didn't. But if you can get the outcome you want, which is safe resolution or whatever they are, it's almost like winning the fight without having the fight, right? Cool. We got to have the outcome we want and nobody got hurt in the process, which is win-win.
I like it. Andrew, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what you guys are saying. And I think that just like a lot of things in our lives, right? Like we've gone through certain testing for certain characteristics, we'll say, to have, or certain raw materials that you need, in a man to be able to do certain jobs or go into certain professions. And usually those things are refined through extreme testing, right? Turning the dial way up, turning the heat up. So if we're talking manners and we're used to extremes being our refinement process, why would this situation be any different, right? This is an extreme situation or scenario where I get to refine what that work on, what my manners, what all this is, what my vibe is, what I'm putting out there. This is the exact extreme opportunity I have to see and test, is this in there or is it not? Because at the end of the day, like I'm not sitting here, like I'm not going to say I want to fight. I can get into fights. I like to fight. I can fight, but I'm also going to defend myself, and I know how to defend myself, and I know how to take care of myself and handle situations. But because of that doesn't mean I'm always going to go into situations looking to fight, because I fought enough to know that I can also get my butt kicked. So I'd rather solve it, like you said, Mark, at the lowest level, right? Because at the end of the day, what are we doing? What are we doing? Right. And to have that know how or that wherewithal, because, in certain tactical environments, or at least military environments and deployments, you have certain outcomes that you can go to. But in my life now, as a coach and a mentor and an advocate and a husband and, a person in the community and all these things, if I resort to violent tendencies right away, what does that say about my manners and how my manners will affect everything else I do and the influence I have on people? Right. So that was one of those situations for me where it was really like trial by fire, right? Like no one wants to get a knife pulled on them. And of course, the first thing I thought of was, well, all knees go backwards the same way. So I'm just going to kick the front of his knee in and collapse his legs. And then he can't walk. And now that's it. Like fixed it. He's old. He's got brittle bones. But like, what good does that do? You know what I mean? So it's like just one of those situations where it's like you could do this or you could do this. You're presented with a choice. What choice are you going to make, young man? And I had to make a choice. And through that choice, I learned. Just like if it went the other way, I would have learned too, right? I'm glad it didn't go that way, and I got to learn the other way. But everything in life is a test of the thing that we say we are or the thing we're trying to become. And it's a proving ground. It just depends on the lens we look at it through.
Ooh, I'm digging this so much. Sean, what do you got?
So I think that my observation has been this, that manners as the gateway, as it were, if we're using that as the reference, the gateway for dysfunctionality. I think it's an interesting idea, but I've got to tie it to perhaps the pandemic in order to sort of give it a more serious look at. Because prior to the pandemic, I wouldn't have gone so far as to say that it's the gatekeeper, the gateway to sort of display the inner dysfunctionality or not. But I would say now, more so in the time that we're in right now, post-pandemic, because I think during the pandemic, so many people didn't know how to communicate their anger or their angst or their frustrations or their whatever. Like, they just didn't know how to communicate that. And by the way, they couldn't like walk across the street and tell their neighbor that. And so like a lot of things initially were internalized, and these feelings, these emotions, and by the way, manners are the vibe. So this thing that we didn't know how to deal with was building up within people, and their vibes were changing, I believe. Like, you pre-pandemic, maybe you were a pretty positive person. Halfway through the pandemic, you thought Mars was going to invade us, and there's a country somewhere in the world that you hate because of that. I mean, that's what happened. We had this event that then polarized people in so many ways that their internal world shifted. And now, with all of that inner frustrations and inability to explain how they changed, manners changed. When someone would have been polite and say, "Hey, how you doing, neighbor?" Now it's just a grunt or a groan. And I'm not talking about my neighbors, because my neighbors are cool as hell. But on the sidewalk, even in my little mountain town, pre-pandemic, pretty much everyone would nod at each other as you walk down the sidewalk, because we're a small mountain town, 3,500 people. Everyone knows everyone. And to Mark's point, you do have to play a smart game when it's a small mountain town. But post-pandemic, not everyone's nodding. I think we've still got people that are sorting through the wreckage, the emotional wreckage of the pandemic, and they have yet to figure out how to play their next move, their next trajectory, who they are now versus who they used to be, how they work in this world versus how they used to work in that world. I do believe a lot of people are still processing that. And so, if manners are the gateway to the dysfunctionality, what I'm seeing is way less manners, because people are way more dysfunctional than I think anyone really wants to talk about.
Sean, can I jump in there? I agree with you. And I actually think we kind of hit on a bit of a new topic, which is bad manners. And I think one way we see that is online, because I think it's so much easier to like tell someone they're a terrible human being or whatever your version of saying that is through a Twitter post or through a social media thing. I think we're in a world where politically things are so divided that's really challenging, where people really do feel that disconnection, and we've lost that ability to just talk to our neighbor. And even though you're on team A and I'm on team B, we can still be friends and get along. We just see things a little bit differently. And I think we've learned to just be in our own echo chambers, as though I'm the only one who's right and anyone who doesn't agree with me is wrong. And I need to do like a attack on them as a person, as opposed to saying, "Hey, why do you feel that way? Maybe I can learn something from you." The other way that I saw some of the bad manners for me, and another little story, I saw it in sports. Like, I grew up playing hockey, where like if you mouth somebody off, like there was fighting time, right? Like someone comes and calls you a little whatever, like, okay, let's go, right? And I was playing senior A hockey, so it's basically junior hockey for men, for adults, and there's hitting and fighting and stuff. I don't have guys come and like say those kind of things to you, just lip you off and just be super disrespectful and rude and whatever. And I just go over and be like, okay, like I guess we're gonna fight now. Like, okay. And then they would be like, "Oh my God, no, and I'm like I think sometimes, and I know there's a that idea of like, oh, the next generation, they don't get it. But like when I grew up, like you might have 5 fights in a game or 8 fights in a game, and you didn't get to go around saying things like that to everyone. But I think that's become so normalized, as you said, a bit through the pandemic and a bit through this online shift that you wouldn't say that to someone in the same way. You wouldn't just turn around to the person at the coffee shop behind you and say the kind of things you say to them online. And I think we kind of need to get a little bit of that back.
Yeah, and this I think goes back to that anonymity comment I made earlier as well. And it's challenging in the digital realm to to, as you said, say something to someone's face. It is a lot more challenging to stare at me at 6'5", 220 and tell me to screw myself in any vocabulary you want to use. It's a lot different standing in front of me than it is on a phone. And you're absolutely right. Bad manners kind of have evolved from there. Now, before we get too far into the conversation, I want to hit some of these comments on the Instagram side. They've been popping off quite a bit. So I just want to touch on these before we go too far, because some of them are awesome. Corbin Bobby jumped in here. He said, manners are humanized, instinctive behaviors, primal ways to act and react. Dan Cameron jumped in and said, in my humble opinion, manners are an outward expression of your integrity. Simple actions such as helping. We got Glenn Kirkland jumped in here and said, where was Sean's manners when he murdered that poor banana? I tell you, Sean. That's a great video, by the way. Really enjoyed it. Corbin Bobby jumped in and said, manners are acquired with positive influences that you acquire during your entire lifetime. It can be expressed with or without words and body language. And I really love that comment in the fact that it can be learned through your whole lifetime. A lot of times we think of it, we get it from our parents and well, now I have my manners and that's how it's set. But your manners get changed, especially when you join the military or the police or things like that, because you have to adapt to that new situation. We got a couple questions. Ethos and Eros Project said, how do you all feel about isolation as to avoid conflict? It's hard to communicate, losing 3/4 of your staff and quadrupling your work during the pandemic. And then they jump in and said, Sean, you got it 100%. So we're going to pass that question. Little Woodworks asked this. What if in the moment where there's options, but you're not able in the moment to regulate yourself, and then you make the wrong choice? What if? Andrew, you want to jump on this one?
Self-reflection is the most powerful tool in that situation, right? You can't change what you did, right? But you can kind of take that data, receive that data, take the feedback, whether constructive, positive, negative, and find yourself in that situation again later on down the line and do a little bit better. It's very similar to like if you're on the range and say you miss a shot, don't focus on that shot, because now all of them are going to get grouped down in that bad little area. That once that range or that round leaves that chamber, you can't think about it anymore. It's on to the next one. So interactions can be very similar in that way. We're not going to get everything right. We're not pure perfect human beings, right? But if you can self-reflect, if you can learn from it and you can apply from the data that you're receiving in your world, you're a lifelong learner. And I think everyone on this would probably agree with me in that, whether they use the same words or not. But I think that's one thing that, ties all of us, is we're all into gathering data and learning from that data and continuously growing as men. And I completely agree with that, concept of manners being a lifelong thing, because I've even changed since interacting with you guys over the last, year and a half. So it definitely changes with the people you're around and the standards that you hold and all of that. But yeah, absolutely. Self-reflect, write too, write down what you're feeling and then read it.
That is a beautiful point. Being able to actually see it on the page is it's a game changer. Being able to actually physically write, so it's not in the echo chamber of your freaking brain. Mark, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll echo one thing Andrew said towards the end there, which is I actually also agree that I think like interacting with this community, getting to listen, getting to come on and join these discussions has helped with that. Like even something like some of the simple rules of just not swearing. And honestly, then like you bring that home, then I'm a better dad with my kids who swears less and just is a little bit more thoughtful, and a little bit more respectful. And we brought up kids a little bit. I know it's something we talk about, but I try to remember that they're going to do what I do, not what I say. They're going to treat people the way I treat the cashier, the way I treat, the whoever I'm interacting with. Then every one of those interactions matters. Like that whole lifelong learning. They're learning from every interaction I have. And personally, I actually try to have good manners and be kind and tell them have a nice day or any of those kind of things. Just even back to the vibe. Give that person a little bit of your attention, a little bit of your respect. It's, do you actually ask them, hey, how are you? How's your day? Or something kind of like that, which gives off the vibe of, hey, you matter. I'm actually willing to look at you, to talk to you, to take a minute to remember your name, and not just busy trying to, check an email while I wait for this coffee kind of thing. So yeah, I'll ultimately just echo what Andrew said. I think I get a lot from being a part of this community, and I think that's actually helped me as well.
And not only that, like the swearing one, especially, man, I used to swear up a storm. And since starting this show, I almost find it distasteful now to hear it out in the public. Like it seems odd. So weird. Sean, you got any thoughts now?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm so glad that that rule was set before day one started on the podcast. Just freaking no swearing, man. Like it has changed my world as well. And I do love swearing, but I just don't, I try not to do it in my house. I really do try. And I definitely try not to swear on the podcast. And it does change the way you think. It rewires your brain. It changes the way you communicate. So if I'm struggling for whatever the next word is, instead of saying the F bomb, which was like pretty standard issue back in the day, I mean, you were a super freaking hero. If you could string a word of F bombs, you could string 7 or 8 of them into a single sentence. It was heroic, but I don't look at it that way anymore. So if we are a result of what we're surrounded by, then surround yourself with people and experiences that lift you up, not drag you down. And something that I've been trying not to focus on too much, but it's hard not to see. If you're paying attention to Mark, can you pull Mark up on the main screen, please, Chance, for a sec? There we go. Up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a bobby hat, or a sort of a black hat with a crest on the front. From my perspective, it looks like a hat that would be worn by a bobby or by a policeman or policewoman from the UK, United Kingdom. When I was growing up as a kid, that's what all the police officers wore, was a bobby hat. That's what we called it, a bobby. A bobby was a police officer. And so that bobby hat to me is a excellent representation of Mark has traveled, or Mark has interacted with people who are not just from Canada. He's more of a global perspective rather than a small town boy perspective. To get a bobby hat, something had to have happened prior to him getting it that was to some degree international. And so I'm going to use that as the setup to enter into something that might feel initially political, but you know that I'm not a political person, but it's going to feel like that initially. And Chance, please confirm that I rarely wear the collective t-shirt.
Rarely. Because as proud as I am of the t-shirt, in fact, Chance and I kind of crafted it together. The design I like. I'm proud of the podcast, but I don't chirp about it too much. And I don't want anyone to misunderstand that by talking about the collective a lot, it's through ego. So, like, for whatever reason, I've chosen not to wear the collective t-shirt too much because I don't want anyone out there to misconstrue that I'm just trying to put a podcast up in their face all the time. So I wore it this morning for a reason. On this sleeve is an American flag. On this sleeve is a Canada flag. And right now, I've got friends and acquaintances and generally like people that I barely know who are contacting me on social media sometimes in this current time, this friction between the North American countries. I want everyone to understand that I'm a big fan of the American people. We lived in America for 2 years in Texas, and I loved it. And I've done a boatload of racing down in the US. And I've got friends down there that are lifetime friends.
And so I am not using bad manners against the American people. I'm just bummed that we're getting disrespected right now by a handful of people in America. And so I don't care for the disrespect. That has got nothing to do with I don't care for the American people. And so I think that's kind of the crux of this conversation, as it were. If you want to be rude to Americans as a Canadian, I think you have misunderstood what manners are. Manners are being cool with someone, even if you can't agree with everything they say. There'll be something that Andrew and I don't see eye to eye on. I don't know what that would be. Maybe he's got a favorite poke bowl. I don't know what it is.
I think it's whether mustaches are good or not.
Maybe it's different than mine. Yeah, I do disagree with his mustache. That's fair. So, like, there'll be things that we disagree about, but we'll have so much commonality on so many things that we don't have to be goofs to each other. So the manners in this aspect is me just being cool with him and him being cool with me. And we don't always have to say thanks every third word. And I don't always have to be opening the door for him. Because at a baseline value, we are respectful to each other. And so I've found recently, over the last couple of weeks, that Canadians are starting to lose sight of what it means to be polite. Like, universally, if you've traveled the world, in all of the countries that I've been to, every single country has high regard for Canadian politeness. I mean, I generally speaking, I think it's a sense of national pride on how polite we are. But somehow I think we're kind of losing our way a little bit over the last few weeks. Like, we're becoming less polite to our southern neighbors, and there's no freaking reason for that. Because Andrew didn't change. Andrew's friends didn't change. What has changed is a messaging system, a disinformation program, a programming that people are getting right now, and they're getting riled up. They're becoming less mannerful, and there's no need for it. So, manners are not just you get to select how nice you are to your next door neighbor. Manners are a universal code. They're a universal vibe. They are actually who you are all the time, irrespective of borders or boundaries or attitudes. But that's something that is a pretty big subject. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
The whole podcast in of itself. Andrew, you got something?
Yeah. So what I would say to that would be, it's almost one of those things too, where kind of Sean using that example, right? Like, we tend to use, and same thing, not to get political, but politics is sports teams. So it turns into you're either with us or against us. And it's not necessarily people seeking to understand each other. And like you said there, you haven't changed, I haven't changed. Maybe some relations at a much higher level that have nothing to do with us has changed, right? But the way we treat each other, that shouldn't change. But one thing that has affected me, or I've noticed just since the pandemic, is manners are almost like just like I do certain things when I coach to my athletes to kind of see where they're at, get feedback, to run an assessment. If you present yourself to me with bad manners, that's an assessment on me that you are not someone I'm probably going to want to engage with. So in that example, if you were to come to me and find out that I am an American and I live in America, and all of a sudden you have a problem with that because of something my president did or didn't do, or this or that and the other thing, I'll let you say whatever you want, but probably that's going to be the last conversation you ever have with me. Right. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'll also use those manners from what I'm either getting and receiving or giving to gauge how much I'm really going to want to be around this person. Or to use what you said, Sean, if me and you always got along every single time, that would be weird too. Because how are we helping each other grow if we think the same thing every single time? So if you can't have manners to show me that you're open-minded enough to see into the bigger picture instead of just what's on the TV or the radio or your Instagram or your TikTok or whatever, like we're not going to be able to have the type of conversations that I'm seeking in this world. So it's also a great gauge to use on where people are at, and I think for a lot of us, we can always blame other people, other situations, but it's always a deterrence from looking in the mirror because we can't control anything else. So what can you do? So in the end of the day, like if I'm always going to bring it back to what am I doing in the situation, and I only have control over that, it's the same exact thing. If someone's going to hate me for X, Y, and Z or not like me from X, Y, and Z, I have the ability to disengage and not even be in the conversation and just let them yell into the abyss if that's what they want to do. Because I'd rather be constructive and find great people who don't care what side of the border we live on, but we're active go getters who want to get the most out of this life because it's the only shot we have. And we're not here to prove ourselves right, but to seek and understand. That's my tribe. That's who I'm looking for.
Now, I have a thought on this, and I want to get your guys' mindsets on it because I wrote down here manners under stress, and it occurred to me while you guys have all mentioned it actually throughout is that we come from high stakes environments. There's lots of stress involved in the training. There's all these things, but I find that when you have that level of training, when you come out of all of the things that we've come out of, your concept of stress diminishes to such a degree that the manner is like, oh my god, my car broke down, and you'll get out and be like, wow, cool, all right. You'll say hi to the tow truck driver and you'll shake his hand. And I have a story about we had a domestic issue with a neighbor of ours. We had to call the police, so on and so forth. There was lots of things that happened while they were trying to get our statements. I finished mine very quickly, military style, right? This happened at this time, this happened at this time, this happened at this time. And my wife was detailing a story and really, she had 3 pages she was working on. But the whole time I was like, hey man, you got a 226 on your hip there? And he's like, yeah, I do. And like, you know guns very well? And he's like, oh yeah, I do. Come down to the locker. Let's take a look. And it was a stressful time for a lot of people, but I didn't find it that stressful because I've gone through other higher stress things. So I was able to maintain a higher level of manners, or my vibe was much smoother, more relaxed than some other people who were very stressed out. And so my question to you guys is this. Do you think that since the pandemic, especially last 5 years or so, people have been under so much stress constantly, and it's fed to them through the news, and it's fed through their phone, fed to them for the people around them, their workplace, they're constantly under stress. And I'm wondering if that could be one of the reasons that manners has almost disappeared nowadays, and the fact that people are just under so much stress they can't process it in the moment. What do you guys think? Mark, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I've been making a few notes throughout this conversation, and both Sean's last talk when he got into a little bit of the Canada-US thing, part of what I wrote next to that was pain and anger. And Andrew, as you were talking, I also end up writing pain because I just think, and Chance, it kind of connects with what you just said. I think people have felt a lot of pain, and there's different types of pain. There's physical pain, but there's emotional pain and psychological pain, and even financial hardship. I look at things like in Canada, where you look at the GDP per capita, like how much money each person makes, like it's almost stayed the same for 10 years. And with a lot of wealth inequality, I think a lot of people feel worse off. So there's a lot of people just hurting and angry. And where does that go? Right? It lashes out at others. And Chance, what you said about the stress tolerance, how many people have been through life and death situations where they know that their baseline of what matters is like, man, I might die today, versus, like you said, the car broke down or whatever. I don't mean to trivialize it because some of these things can be very important to other people, but you know that it's not life or death. You can put it in perspective with like, my kids will be okay. I will be okay. And that I have a certain level of comfort and safety, whether those are financial, emotional, physical. And a lot of people don't feel that. And then the last part I'll add, about the economic side in the news. Like, how much negativity? How often do you read a story in the news that says this person did a great job, this great thing happened, and there's a sunny day over here and someone's smiling? Like, you don't. And I rarely read much news anymore. I scan a bit of headlines, but I don't think it's very good for me to just read about another terrible story about another horrible person doing a terrible thing. So I try and kind of stay away from some of it because I'm limiting how much negativity I want to let that bring into my life. I'll learn about them when I need to, but I think that frees me up to have more capacity to try and do good in my own world.
I really like that. Andrew, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that it's like just understanding your limits and with what that looks like. I think if we think about stress, so stress in terms of my world, physical training is just it's stress. It's putting the body under stress, right? So it's finding a fight or flight. So very similar responses, right? If you think about the last 5 years, people have almost been in this constant state of fight or flight. They're not able to get out of it. So the things that are allowing you to survive in this world are not the same things that allow you to thrive. So I feel like a lot of people are still kind of stuck in that survival mode of like, I need to self preserve. I need to take whatever I can and hold the chips that I got, this, that, and the other thing, instead of now realizing, like, okay, we're 5 years out of this thing. Like, what else do we do? And I'm only using the pandemic as an example because you could even use any traumatic event that could just get you stuck, right? And keep you in that position. And I think the ability to know what your left and right parameters are, because I do the same thing, like very similar to Mark. I don't watch the news on TV. I scan certain headlines and that's about it. Or like even if social media is getting crazy, I just take it off my phone. Like, and yeah, it's a big part of my life because I run my business through it. But ultimately, if I'm not good, nothing I'm involved with is going to be good. So if we realize that that's all out there in the world, going back to self accountability, if you can't stop the amount of volume coming in, how can we stop it? By removing yourself from it, right? It's that old saying of like, the only way you can win the game is not play. Like, that bad news sells. That bad news gets headlines. Bad news gets viewership. That crazy shock and awe is what gets people to tune in on social media. But we also know what that does to us. So if we know that the stove is hot, why keep touching it?
That's a great point. Sean, you got any thoughts?
I'm thinking about your story and how, someone showed up, a first responder, Leo, showed up to the situation. And I'm sure it was a longer scenario than just, hey, is that a P226? Let's go check out my gun locker. And so the interesting aspect of that story is on that day, it worked out. But the following day, it might not have. And the day before, it might not have. And that is the way of life, man. It's not a one and done. It's not a one-way highway. It's a two-way highway. So the individual who showed up to respond to the call may have been having an off day. And you were on your front lawn at your 7'4" height and 400 pounds of solid steel. And as that individual walked up, perhaps they looked at your skyscraper head and thought, oh, it's on like Donkey Kong. And that conversation would have gone a whole different way. And so manners or mannerisms or the vibe, if the individual who responded to the call had just spilled a hot coffee on their lap, now they're irritated, that call could have been completely different. And so it's Chance's job, or it's all of our job in the moment to adapt, to understand that it's a dynamic situation, to understand that the one tool that you've got in your toolbox may not be enough. So reach down and see if there's any other tools in there. Instead of being aggressive in the moment, maybe you need to be neutral in the moment. Instead of being neutral in the moment, maybe you need to be conciliatory. There's so many ways to play a situation. And I think that is the key word, play. Not play as in juggling balls, but play with the moment to some degree in a serious way, but understand that it has malleability. It is not just this is all I can do in the moment and that's all I'm going to do. No one who is in their 20s and older only has one tool. We've got, and as you expand your footprint, as you travel the world, as you meet bobbies and get bobby hats, you are a richer person. You're a more experienced worldly person with more worldly tools. So, Chance, how you responded in that moment is one thing. How Andrew, Mark, and I would respond in the moment are different things. And Mark, I'm using him as the spotlight because of the bobby hat. Mark will respond in that moment with a hint of Bobbyism because he understands, or at least he's been exposed to how Bobbies work, how Bobbies think. And maybe Andrew won't, because maybe he hasn't had that interaction with Bobbies. And so we all are an outcome or a result of the extent of our lives to this day. And how we respond each moment is a reflection of how much we have dug into our moments. If you've lived a life blindly with blinders on, just forging ahead, but never reflecting, never thinking, never growing from the moments that are passing by, you're showing up to each scenario with one tool. So manners are not just a simple please and thank you. And they're not also just a simple vibe. Manners are our life. They are a representation of the novel that is our life. And if every time you show up in front of someone and you're ignorant and rude and can never apologize or never be thankful, that just tells me that your book of life was narrow and thin and disappointing. That's food for thought.
Mic drops right there. The and I don't mean to switch gears hard here, but I want this. And this is going to fade into what we're going to talk about here, and that is the linkages between manners and mental health. And I think this is a key thing that we should really touch on, because we're at an hour and a half already, and it just flew by. But I want to talk about specifically how those interactions can affect not only your mental health, but the people around you. Like, we've kind of touched on it here and there through the whole episode so far, but I really want to dig into it because, Sean, there's been times where we've had on the show, you've said, well, people just need to smile more. We've talked about gratitude. We've talked about being calm. We've talked about presence in the moment. We've talked all kinds of different ways that we could play this. But I find that when I am more respectful, when I play into my manners more, when I hold doors open for people, and whether I had an image in my head of the days back in the unit when you would hold a door open for somebody and they would walk through and you'd trip them just on purpose, just to show you love them, right? So there's levels to the game when you're talking about that. But when I lean into my morals, when I lean into my gratitude, when I lean into all these things, I find my mental health is in a better state overall. Because, and it's hard sometimes when I'm in a depressive episode or something like that, and I don't want to do those things, but I do them anyway. I find it helps me overall, and it helps with the interactions with people that I interact with, right? I get a better response, which makes me feel better, which et cetera, and kind of builds on it. So what are your guys' thoughts on that, the linkages between manners and mental health? Andrew, I'm going to hit you first. What do you think?
Ooh, so right away, I would say the biggest thing that pops into my head or makes me think of is being constructive or destructive. And I know for me, kind of like you're saying, I have or my natural default setting, if I'm not in a good place mentally, is to be very destructive. And I don't mean destructive towards other people, but naturally I have a tendency to be self-destructive, self-deprecating. And those are things that I've had to learn how to navigate, even within the old manners in which the way I talk and speak to myself. So one thing I've had to learn how to do is, even with my interactions, is I do my best to make sure my intention with my interaction is constructive. Now, whether that means we get, all the framework and drywall up in one day because we're cooking with fire, or maybe all we did was mix concrete, but like it's still constructive. Some work in the positive is always better than the negative, destructive work, because then I need to go back, clean that up, and then start over again. And that's where those tools, when it comes to my mannerisms or tools of intentional interaction, writing, self reflection, really have come into play because I know that when I'm not in a bad place, like for example, I know we've talked about all these different things with our work, but what do we bring home from our work? Because I've been married for 14 years. So my wife has a lot of the secondary things that I've dealt with post service, post veteran advocate. I'm still getting up at 3:30 in the morning as a coach, dealing with people, dealing with their issues, helping them the best that I can. But sometimes she gets the residual effect of whatever's left over from a day of interactions. Again, am I going to choose to be constructive or destructive with that? Am I going to give my wife the manners that everyone else has gotten, or even more because she's the most important person to me? Or is she going to get what's left over because she knows how much that I'm giving to everyone else? And now she's carrying on that secondary feeling of whatever it is that I'm harboring. But I notice, like you, Chance, when my intention is matching and it's constructive, everything in my life is a lot better. And it all comes back to that internal monologue. How am I treating myself? How am I talking to myself? How am I navigating the manners, the responses that people are giving me? And how am I kind of doing what Sean said, which is remaining fluid? Because I can't be big, strong, and then have all this stuff happen, and then a big storm comes in my life and it completely tips me over. In this type of instance, I need to be more like a willow tree or a bamboo and be able to ebb and flow and have the strength and the dexterity and the flexibility to go and navigate and move with everything, because if not, I'm going to break. And eventually, whether it's biomechanically or anything else, weak things break. If we do not address it, it becomes weak, and when it's a weakness, it will be exploited and it will break in the most inconvenient time. And I say that whether it's in the training room or when it comes to how we navigate what goes on in here, So for me, I prefer to be constructive and intentional, because then everything I produce in my life or the things that I'm involved with usually mirror that. And I try to surround myself with the same thing. That's why that good dude vibe check is so important. The manners you bring to me are very important because I have a specific mission with my life, and you're either going to be a part of that journey or you're not. But I'm not in the business of carrying dead weight, just like you guys. So, it's one of those things where like I'm very reflective on it, not out of like, oh, this is so good for me, but it's out of bare bone necessity, because if not, I've already seen the other extreme of trying to put, for lack of a better term, a pistol in my mouth. So I know what happens when I'm not intentional and I'm not constructive. I see how dark and how bad it can get, how quick it can get. So that's a major motivator and a driver for me, and a big way of why I interact and how I interact the way that I do.
That's a fantastic point. Mark, you got something?
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Andrew. That's important stuff to talk about, and I appreciate you being willing to share both about some of your own hardship, but even drawing into like your marriage and stuff like that. That's important. For me, back to your original question there, Chance, my number one thought is on capacity. So if someone is struggling, if they are traumatized, if they have, PTSD or PTSI or whatever we want to call things, but the symptoms are similar, right? To nightmares and rage and all that. How much capacity do you have for manners when you're struggling like that? And I would say in those moments, that can be pretty hard. So just understanding where we're at. My other thought is connection, right? Because our number one way to regulate is with others. So for me, Bessel van der Kolk, he writes a book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's a fantastic book. If anyone out there is struggling with mental health or trauma or any of that kind of stuff, highly recommend reading that book. That was my biggest takeaway from his book. Connection is your number one protective factor from trauma. So in a weird way, you're traumatized, so you don't have a lot of capacity for manners. Honestly, for some people, you're harder to be around, right? You're angry and yelling and drinking, and it shows up. The pain, once again, back to pain, shows up and it spills over on those around us. And I would argue the most pain probably comes to those that are closest with us, right? It is the ones who love us, our parents, our families, our spouses, our kids, right? I even see with my kids, like I've been diagnosed with PTSD. I have some levels of trauma residual that are still ongoing, and I'm doing a lot better. I'm doing pretty well, but I'm still not perfect. I still yell at my kids sometimes or swear, or, back to the earlier discussion of manners. Like, it's why I try and remind myself to be my best. It's why I appreciate the chance to come do this and to have it be on the top of my mind when I go and interact with them after we're done here, when I go and put them to bed, to just have that little bit more patience. And then my last thought just builds off you, Andrew, which is to maybe have anyone watching this, have a little self-reflection. Where are your manners at? Not just with the stranger, not just at the coffee shop, not just the person you interact with for 5 seconds and never see again. Where are they with the people you love the most? Because I think oftentimes after that long, hard day and we're wiped and we show up, we don't always have a lot left. And maybe just trying to choose to remember, hey, my kids, my spouse, my family, all that, they're the most important people in my life. Maybe I could do better at showing them how much I love them. And by choosing to have good manners, whether it's role modeling for my kids or whether it's probably a lot nicer to be married to someone who is treating us with those kindness and respects. And Sean, back to your term, who's putting out that vibe. They're putting in the effort in their actions to vibe that they care about you and that you matter, instead of vibing that I'm taking you for granted. So my hope is anyone listening, maybe have a little reflection on how that's been showing up in your life.
I love that. I just have one quick question for you. Vanessa Building Chaos jumped in the Instagram side and said, did anyone catch the book Mark just recommended? Do you mind repeating it for us?
Yeah, sure. The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Not to plug myself, but I actually have a page on my website where I do like book summaries. So if you want to go check it out, you can Google Mark Bouchard. You can look at my book summaries, and that's one of the books I have listed there, where I give you a little like 5-10 minute kind of summary of key takeaways. And it's not meant to replace the book. It's just meant to, I know we're all busy. You don't always have time to read it. And my hope is that it can help people. And I will say personally, it really helped me with my own experience of nightmares and rage and alcohol and trauma. So if anyone's experiencing that, I highly recommend reading The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
Bam. Love it. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I do. Speaking of books, who's this guy? Is that Mark Bouchard's book? So if we're recommending books, this is one of my main recommendations for anyone who is, and I'm not going to say struggling, for anyone who wants to learn how to live a better life, who's lived a tough life. And so anyone who's watching again, write down Setting My Sights on Stigma, Thoughts from an Injured Mind by Mark Bouchard. Buy it.
Hey, I
Moving
know
right
a guy named
along.
Mark Bouchard.
Hey, Sean, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 sec because I first off appreciate that. So thank you. And I try not to be super self-promotion-y. My chapter 6, which is all about trauma and finding post-traumatic growth, is really summarizing things like Bessel van der Kolk, what I learned, and it's me leaving breadcrumbs behind to help the next generation, other people ultimately. And I know I've told you guys this before, but I'll give my book away to anybody it can help. And I've actually set it up that way on my website now. Anyone who goes and plugs in their email address, technically you're signing up to be notified of my next book, which isn't even out yet and pretty much no one even knows. You get a free PDF of my book. So anyone who wants to read it, I never wrote it to sell it to you. I wrote it to help you. And you can go and read it online for free by just going to my website, my name, markbouchard.ca, and you can get a copy for free.
Bam. I'll put the link to that in
Yeah.
the show notes so anybody
Definitely.
can jump on there. Sean, you got any thoughts then?
Yes. So that, to me, Mark's book is kind of mandatory reading for anyone out there that I know who is struggling at any level. It's a freaking awesome book. So go figure it out. Go get a copy. The reason I raise Mark's book up is because our manners are a creation, as I've said already, of the things that influences that are all around us in our lives. If you don't read, then your understanding of manners is limited compared to someone who does read. And so if you're a person who travels, if you've been to other countries, you'll understand that, as an example, we just came back from Thailand just a couple 3 months ago. one of the most mannerful or polite or happy or gentle or kind, insert whatever word you want when you think of manners. It's called, like, everyone smiles. Chance, you'd raised the idea up earlier that for a while there I was asking people just to try to, like, show your teeth on occasion. Throw a smile in you, you goof. You know, everyone's all sort of like aggro and sort of, you know, just stern all the time. I used to be that guy. But if you can smile, it kind of breaks your own ice, not breaks the ice for you interacting with someone else. And so what we put into our minds, what we put into our lives, what we absorb is who we become. And so surround yourself with people who have manners. And I want to throw a little bit of a different subject onto this piece, and that is, we're talking about a good way to demonstrate that you have manners, particularly, 2-3 decades ago. It used to be extremely commonplace when we say manners maketh the man. It was almost obligatory that a man opened a door for a woman. That was just common courtesy. Certainly when I was growing up in England, certainly when I first moved to Canada, it was normal. And that's got nothing to do with sexism in my mind. It's got everything to do with, I was taught that you open a door for a woman. And I still do it. However, it's not a one-way street. And this is important to my belief, that we are backsliding as a society when it comes to being mannerful. Here's the deal. If I see a lady just about to walk into a coffee shop or a shopping mall or whatever, and if I've never ever seen them before, if I reach out and grab that door and open it up and kind of like create that open space for her to go through, if she just breezes right on past me like I'm a doorman, like I'm a $6 per hour doorman that was hired to open doors for her, if she gives me the disrespect of not even like acknowledging that I exist, I was put on this planet only for her to open her doors, that freaking irks me, man. It irks me that someone accepts the open door but expects me to have done it without even a nod, without even a good morning, without even a thank you, without even a I exist. And so, depending on my mood, more correctly, depending on the vibe I got from the person, if they're like really disrespecting me like I work for them in that moment of common courtesy, I have in the past, as that person passes through, said, hey, you're welcome. And I've said it loud enough that there is no ignoring what I just said. And sometimes I'll say it loud enough that the group hears it. And then it's for them to figure out the rest. I don't care beyond that point. But what I don't like to do is let us all backslide without any correction. And I'm not saying I'm slapping any wrists. What I am saying is we can't just keep ignoring the discourteous actions of everyone. If it becomes normalized that I'm now working for the entire world to open doors and now don't exist as a person, where's my agency? Who am I? Do I have value? And I think that even though that sounds crazy, I do believe every human feels it, either consciously or unconsciously. And if you're unconsciously feeling like you just got taken advantage of as you open that door and got ignored at whatever level, that stays with you. And whether you realize it or not, whether you think about it or not, day after day, month after month, year after year, it stacks up and makes you think, screw that, I'm never opening doors again. and you don't even know why. And so it can't just be a one-way conversation. It can't just be a one-way interaction. You are interacting with the person. If they don't interact with you, it shouldn't just be a shoulder shrug and whatever, man, let's just keep backsliding. But you don't have to do it every single time. What you do have to do is think about when to do it at a time.
Yeah. It's the it's the accountability piece Andrew was talking about earlier, right? And I don't hold doors open for people so that I can hold doors open for people. That's not why I do it. I do it because for myself, I feel it's my responsibility. And this is funny. I was in Red Deer just a little while ago. I stopped into Tim Hortons to use the bathroom, and another guy got out of his truck just like right next to me, and we kind of saw each other as we were coming up to the door, and he took an extra couple of steps to get ahead of me to get the door, and then I got the second door, and then he got the next door, and like we created this little chain, and we were like, well, thank you. And he was like, well, you're welcome. And I thank you very much. And you're welcome. And just kind of rolled down the through the sequence of doors towards the bathroom. And those little interactions they can change people's days. They can change people's lives. And if you open the door, I do the same thing, Sean. When I open the door and somebody just kind of like shuffles past you, like it's no big, like it's not a big thing, and I'm like, you're welcome, so that everyone can know what just happened there. But I think it comes back to an accountability piece, right? It's on us. It says in the title, manners maketh man. And I don't mean, it does mean, individually, but it also means as a group, as a society. Manners make men. And I think that if you're not actively, effectively trying to build a system of manners, the society falls apart eventually. There's no doubt about that. So I have a question for you guys. I just want to hit a couple of comments here. Brady from Greyman Project jumped in and says, preach, Sean. He's all over you there. Archangel 7 jumps in and said, even with that said, some people have zero respect when it comes to basic human things that are done. So even though it's not the intent to receive praise, it's common courtesy as a different, decent human to be accountable that someone just went out of their way to help you, which again, I love the common courtesy. It is a courtesy that I am holding the door open for you. And I'm not expecting a thank you, but there is the courtesy to it is show your appreciation for someone trying to help you, right? Like that's a key piece to it. Now, the question I have for y'all, we've been talking for an hour and 47 minutes now. Has your concept of manners changed in any way? Have you learned anything through this conversation that you're going to be taking into tomorrow or this afternoon? Andrew, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
If anything, I feel like our conversation has reinforced certain thoughts, but then also shown me like just areas of like continuous refinement, right? Like Sean said it earlier, but like there really is no like one and done. It's like again and again and again and again and again. Like we're always going to have interactions daily, right? Until there's no more air in our lungs, I'm going to be interacting with people. So how can I continue to take the data that's coming in, learn from it, and then just navigate that the best of my abilities? Because even within that statement of like, courtesy, like common sense isn't even common. So why should common courtesy be common? Like I hate to say it that way, but that is our reality. So if that is the reality, like what do I do to try to change that? And you guys have just continued to kind of show me, and I hope that it reinforces for people like keep getting up and fighting a good fight. It may not go your way once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, whatever, but keep getting up, keep showing up, keep trying, because realistically, like that's just a mindset thing. It's a champion mindset thing. It's the ability to continue to get up and engage regardless of how you feel about it, and that's just what it is in my perspective, and it's just my world, the world I'm living in. But I'm thankful for 3 other perspectives of 3 intelligent men who are willing to look beyond themselves as well as within themselves to see why things are the way they are and continue to navigate that. So I feel like it would be impossible for me to say that I'm not going to walk away from this with anything, but I feel like there's so much in here that we've talked about that it's probably going to take a little while to unpack the conversation. But yeah, there's no way I'm not walking around with a backpack full of diamonds after spending 2 hours on a call with you guys. There's no way. Either that or I'm just my manners aren't in check and I probably shouldn't be here. You know what I mean?
I love it. I love the concept too. Fighting the good fight. Something that just clicked in my head is that if it's, would you get up and fight the bad fight? Like really, when you stop and think about it, is that something that you would want to do? And the ability to wake up and consistently fight the good fight has nothing to do with the outcome. It's a fight. You can't have an outcome in it ahead of time. Otherwise, it's just a task. It's not a fight. Mark?
Well, hang
Oh.
on a sec. So some people do wake up in the morning and fight the bad fight because that's who they think they are. They think they're like, I don't know. I don't know the Batman series very well. I don't know why it popped into my head. Is there a dark Batman who's like a goof? Well,
Depends on the storyline you look at.
okay,
But yeah,
so let's kibosh Batman. I'm just saying that there's people who wake up in the morning with malintent. Like they're just freaking losers, man. There are people who don't care about society, about humanity, their fellow man. They're destructive, vindictive, petty, petulant. And it's their way or no way. And they are just a dark force. They're negative. And so Andrew had said that a champion mindset is someone who keeps getting up and keeps getting after it. But, and I know Andrew understands this, there is another little piece to that champion mindset, I believe anyway. At least this is my version of a champion mindset. You get up, you kick that ass, and you lead by example from the front. That is a champion. Someone who frickin' goes all in, not just for themselves. They go all in for everyone around them. That is a champion mindset, in my opinion. And by everyone around them, that doesn't have to be like their team. It could be their coaches. It could be their family. It could be the neighborhood. You freaking get after it to represent. And so I feel that not everyone has that champion mindset. People wake up, they wake up with malintent. And so it comes down to this, I believe, your definition of who you are and what you want to be in life. If you self-select, I'm evil, congratulations, you'll never have manners. If you wake up in the morning and self-identify as a champion, guess what? Guaranteed you're going to have manners, because champions don't get anywhere in life without figuring out how to get along with your fellow man.
bam. And this is simple little things too. Sir and ma'am, thank you, please. All those little things, they add up. Mark, what have you taken from this particular show so far?
Yeah, so much. That's why I enjoy watching the show too when I'm not on, because you learn. So I honestly, the biggest one, Sean, your distinction there, I think it was etiquette, manners, and morality. Just understanding it's more than just the little formality. I think that term of vibe, because you're giving off that message. It's the unsaid message of you matter and I care and you're important. Whether it's holding open a door, whether it's what you say, I think all that matters. I think what you were just saying there, Sean, about malintent, that goes back to the pain. I think sometimes there's people in a lot of pain, and that's a part of how they express it, is that my life sucks. I can go try and make other people miserable. And ultimately, there's some people that are even right up to like psychopaths and sociopaths. So it is a part of how we communicate our pro-social, I want to work with you, you matter, and we're all part of this community. This to me goes back to what the collective is. This was your guys' attempt to build a community to make things better for everyone, right? Not just the people here, but then all of us go and leave today, whether we're on the show with you guys or whether we're, watching it, and then we make the world around us better. So what do I hope I take away? I hope that I take away being a good example tonight for my kids, being a good example tonight with my family, continuing on tomorrow and next week and next month. And I hope that everyone listening does the same. They have a little reflection of how this is showing up in your life, whether it's a day-to-day interaction with the stranger or the person at the coffee shop, or whether it's still, your loved ones. And hopefully it can remind you to just do the little things, right? And to show them that you care, both in actions and in words, and that your life gets a little better because of it and your community gets a little better because of it. And the last thing that I'll lead off with is the leading by example. I think honestly, with what you guys are doing here, that's what you're doing. You're leading by example. And back to the rules of the show, and how there's certain things I can't repeat on the show, because you guys are leading by example. Good for you. Should be proud of that. So thank you.
It is our pleasure, truly. Like, these conversations, actually, Sean and I were talking about this, and the fact that, like, they are distinct timelines in our week. Now we have 2 shows a week, and they are where we get to sit down and have in-depth conversations with cool people, and neither of us want it to stop. Like, it's just such a distinct portion of our week now that it's just fantastic. Now I have 2 comments here I want to touch on. Archangel jumped in here and said, does anyone else get tired of being a good person? And they had LMAO on it and makes a little bit of a joke, but I think that's the good fight. That is what the good fight is. When you get tired of being a good person, and then you, every moment, do your best every day. I think that's the good fight. And then Little Woodworks jumped in here and said, what Sean is saying reminds me of the quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And I think that is another great point. And Archangel jumped in at the end of it, said, this collective has helped me grow and reinforce ideas. I appreciate it, gents. So bam, we're doing good work. Now we're at 155. And I know we just went over what we learned today, but I want any final thoughts, anything bubbling in the back of your brains. I'm going to start with Sean on this one. What do you think?
Sounds good. So my thoughts on the show, final thoughts, are this. It is satisfying to me. Wrong choice of word. It is encouraging to me that I got to hang out with 3 other dudes who understand manners. Because when I came into the show, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I hadn't done a whole pile of thinking about manners, at least to the depth that I did pre-show and during the show, and thought about manners as much as I have over the last 2 hours. So I think that it is encouraging that other men think like I do in respect to manners. Manners maketh the man is true. And we all understand that that is a general reference to all of humanity, men and women. It's an old term. That's why it references men. So, because men don't talk about manners much, if in fact ever, because I never have, if we can have a conversation about manners, and over 2 hours I learned so much, what it does show me, or what it does inform me, is that men have to sit down with other men and have these conversations more often. People who tune into the collective know that one of our rules, okay, race, religion, politics, and no swearing. That no swearing thing is tricky, man. But it is a underlying current in your life that helps teach you manners without beating you down into constantly having to open a door for the entire world. You can run your life with little sub-programs that don't make you feel like you're giving anything away. You can change your life in little ways that make you feel good, make you feel like you're a positive person, make you feel like you're opening the door for the entire world all the time without having to grab a door handle. Manners are your vibe. Manners are what you represent as yourself. And by the way, manners are what represents your family name, your wife and kids, your neighborhood, and your country. So try to be mannerful. Try to be more positive and kind and cool.
I love it. Mark, final thoughts? Anything still bubbling?
Yeah, I'll slightly echo what Sean just said there about being more mannerful. It's just putting it into action. Like, it's one thing to sit and reflect and to learn and to talk and to think about all this. That's awesome, because now you get to go and apply it. And my challenge if whoever's listening, and to each of you here sitting there with me, how are you going to apply this in your life tonight? What's one thing you can do in the next week where you're going to take this and apply it in your world? How are you going to make, back to Sean's term of vibe, how are you going to make your loved ones feel the vibe that you are thinking of them, that you are caring about them? Because, the little things are the big things. So go and find one way you can do that.
Bam. I love it. Andrew, final thoughts?
My final thought would just be to give whoever is listening and you guys some encouragement, because one of the last questions that you read off was, and I know it was a little bit of a joke, but there's some truth in every joke about, don't you get tired of, fighting the good fight or doing the right thing or whatever, however you want to say that. So I was writing down some notes, and, when we get in the position of facing any sort of hardship, at least for me, I like to do hard things. I'm assuming you guys like to do hard things as well, because it exposes certain things to us. So in situations where it's hard for me to be the right guy or to fight the good fight, that's exactly why I fight it, because there's a million reasons to go the other way. But if you have one reason to continue to push through that thing, there's breakthrough on that other side. So I would just want to encourage everyone that if you are tired, if you are feeling beaten down from life, if you're sick of holding the door open physically or metaphorically and just having people say no or not even acknowledging you, let's look at the one reason why we're doing it. What is the good in that? Because at the end of the day, guys, if we boil it down, what has made us is our ability to drive through hardship. So if it's hard to fight the good fight, that's exactly why we're doing it, because it's a worthy battle.
Beautiful. I just got a couple last comments here. Just wanted to touch on these. Rick Yanko jumped in here. He said, we can never stop trying to fight the good fight and keep being a gentleman. Operation Cenotaph, great chat, gentlemen. Corbin Bobby, sticking to and sharing our values and manners makes a better world. And honestly, I can't thank you guys enough. This has just been a fantastic conversation. Mark, Andrew, Sean, thank you. This is awesome. And I know there's a million things that I'm going to take. I got notes all over my page here that I'm going to be taking into my everyday life. I'm going to be taking it into my engagements with my kids, engagements with my students, engagements on the collective, everything. So I really do appreciate it. The only last thought I have is to kind of retouch on everything that we stand for here on the collective, which is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And in that, manners maketh man. So as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next week.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.